So it's really great to have so many of you joining us today for what we hope will be a real celebration of the last decade in TEPoP biodiversity monitoring, and a space to collaboratively start or continue dreaming and planning together for the next decade. So this is the last of our annual UK TEPoP events this autumn, and we've had a really interesting past few weeks hearing about a range of topics from prediction, monitoring at multiple scales, and building community science. And I hope everyone who's attended these events has enjoyed them. And if you missed them and want to catch up on any of them, then their recordings are available on YouTube. If you have any questions or for further information, do email us at tepop@jncc.gov.uk or sign up to our TEPoP bulletin mailing list. So to start with just a little bit of context for those of you who are less familiar with this area of work, we're here to celebrate today, but what exactly are we celebrating? So across the UK, the primary sources of national species evidence are species monitoring schemes, through which volunteer citizen scientists collect huge quantities of data. And there's a huge range of taxonomic groups which are monitored to varying extents, including bats, butterflies, plants, pollinators, and birds in the larger schemes, right through to things like earthworms and fungi and beetles, and a wide range of other taxa through other recording schemes and societies which are supported by the Biological Records Centre. Many of these national monitoring schemes, and all those with logos on the screen, are run through partnerships between JNCC, non-governmental organisations, and the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. The 4 country nature conservation bodies invest in these schemes through JNCC and are actively involved in steering and advisory groups for the schemes. And we circulated a document around last week to those registered for today's event with some further detail about the monitoring schemes, and hopefully this provides useful context to the updates we're going to hear today. So up until 2017, JNCC was the common partner across all these national monitoring schemes. However, we recognise that many of the challenges or opportunities relevant for engaging volunteers with monitoring one taxon are also relevant for other taxa. So it would be beneficial for organisations to potentially work together across this space within the sector. So with all of our partners, we established the UK Terrestrial Evidence Partnership of Partnerships, which was designed to bring together all these organisations involved in funding, organising, running and steering, to collaborate, exchange ideas and work together on shared challenges effectively. And this ethos really underlies today's event. We're here to share and celebrate all the exciting things that schemes have been working on over the last decade, share learning and ambitions, and collaborate on potential future plans. And we're lucky enough to be hearing today from representatives from across a range of monitoring schemes, as well as country nature conservation bodies. So since TEPoP was founded 7 years ago, we've expanded the kind of official TEPoP network to welcome several other organisations who are keen to collaborate into our discussions. And many of you are here with us today as well, and we welcome you to this event and the discussions. Hopefully this will serve as an opportunity to learn more about TEPoP monitoring and data, and identify opportunities for wider collaboration of mutual benefit. And we're sorry we can't hear from every organisation in attendance through presentations, but we welcome any updates, or ideas or input from anybody on the concept board that we have available for this event, with the link on the screen or the slide. And please do use this board for updates and conversations and sharing links and making contacts both during and after the event. We'll leave it open. So last year we asked many of you for your feedback about TEPoP and its ways of working. And many people contributed lots of really useful thoughts and ideas. So a really big thank you for this. There were several suggestions that more opportunities to celebrate and share what schemes we're working on would be welcomed, as well as updates and join up with country nature conservation bodies. So hopefully today's event goes some way towards fulfilling these interests. And we're going to hear from a lot of schemes and organisations in 2.5 hours. So I'd encourage everyone to think of this as the sort of start of the conversation and a catalyst for new ideas. So there's loads to celebrate from the last decade in terms of delivering high quality evidence from TEPoP schemes. We've seen the launch of 2 new schemes, which has significantly increased the number of species for which we can assess abundance change, as well as providing insights into habitats and ecosystem service provision. Several big decadal milestones have also been reached across longer running schemes, up to 80 years of recording. So a really big happy birthday to them. And this is really a testament to the longevity of the organisational and volunteer commitment which underlies the species recording. Oh, I'll just get back here a bit. So before we hear more about the fantastic achievements from individual schemes, I just wanted to take a minute or two to celebrate some combined and collective achievements. JNCC's strategy, Together for Nature, highlights 3 core values of collaboration, innovation, and inclusion. And I think combined achievements across TEPoP align really closely with these. So firstly, on collaboration, a bit of a blast from the past photograph for some of you who were in attendance back in 2019. We've had 3 in-person TEPoP conferences across the UK. We've run 29 online TEPoP events, including both workshops and talks, which have spanned a huge range of topics. More than 50 organisations have been involved at annual events, and many of the conversations have spurred creation of sort of TEPoP subgroups to collaborate on several topics, for example, focusing on things like shared communications across schemes to emphasise and amplify their impacts. On innovation, we've seen 8 years of the Terrestrial Surveillance Development and Analysis Partnership, comprised of BTO, UKCEH and JNCC working together, and alongside and with TEPoP and biodiversity monitoring schemes. A wide range of work has been undertaken, including analyses using TEPoP schemes data, as well as work looking to beneficially develop TEPoP schemes for volunteers, as well as scheme organisers and data users. This has generated 35 TSDA publications, plus many more currently close to publication, and 12 of which are scientific journal papers. Work in TSDA links into and supports work underway, which is focusing on monitoring at multiple scales. And thanks to many of you on the call who've worked within and alongside the TSDA partnership and have contributed to these outputs through conceptualization, steering, provision of data and its interpretation, as well as review and co-authoring of outputs. TSDA has been very successful in initiating areas of work which have sort of grown and spun off to be their own larger pieces of work. For example, the Biodiversity Pathways project, which we discussed in our first TEPoP event this year, developed out from analyses starting within TSDA, focusing on the impacts of protected sites, and work on bioacoustics supported through TSDA has led to or contributed to the recent formation of the UK Bioacoustics Working Group, which we hope will support really beneficial collaboration in this space. Finally, inclusion. I think an area that I don't think was on so many of our minds back in 2015, a decade ago, was the diversity, equity and inclusion of our monitoring schemes. But this is certainly not the case anymore. And the last decade has seen a huge increase in appreciation that breaking down barriers to engagement for groups in societies underrepresented in our volunteers has the potential to have big benefits for individual schemes and society. So through surveys and focus groups and targeted engagement, many schemes now have a much clearer understanding of the demographics of their current volunteers and the barriers that underrepresented groups face to engaging with schemes. And across many schemes, a range of actions to increase accessibility and inclusion have taken place. So although change in this space is long-term and pace varies across schemes, based on UK TEPoP collaboration, we've published a TEPoP DEI strategy to capture shared ambitions and overall approaches. Also in this space, this year, TEPoP partners have been awarded NERC funding to form the Careers Super Consortium with the Yorkshire Consortium for Equity and Doctoral Education in a project designed to explore the barriers to and opportunities from citizen science biodiversity monitoring for students of colour at Yorkshire universities. So bringing all that together, I hope you'll agree that there's loads to celebrate, and thanks to everybody who's played a part in all of these collaborative projects. Oh, sorry, what is this going? So as well as celebrating past successes, we will be hearing about future ambitions today. Through the workshop later on, hopefully we can explore where our ambitions and priorities align such that we can take some practical actions to make progress together. We'll be thinking about short-term and long-term. What would you like us to do together in the next few months, and what should we work on together over the next few years? So that's enough from me. I think we've got a packed agenda, as you can see here, with 12 sort of quick lightning talks from schemes, and then a 10-minute break. And then we'll be hearing from country nature conservation bodies with an update about how they've been using TEPoP data and views for the future. Then we've got some discussion groups, and then pulling together that into some conclusions by 12:30 and in time for lunch. So schemes updates are roughly ordered by age of scheme, with a few exceptions for speaker availability. Yes, I'd encourage you to please keep to time because we've got so much to hear about. So without further ado, I will pass on to our first speaker, which is Ellie Leach from the British Trust for Ornithology, who is the head of ringing and nest record schemes. So Ellie, over to you.
Thanks very much. I'll just check that I can do this. Yes, that's brilliant. Thank you. I'll plough straight in. So the first achievements that I want to focus on for the ADS scheme are logistics, really operational. And two things that I've chosen here. The first is the rise of DEMON, or Demography Online. This is our online data inputting system that we've developed in-house to replace a previous access-based system, IPMR, and the benefits of that have really been massive in terms of both streamlining our data processing and also allowing much more of the record validation to sit with volunteers. So it's really effective from that aspect, and also in terms of increasing the accessibility of volunteers' data to themselves, so they can do some WYSI reporting and things like that. So that's been great. The second element is that I focused on is streamlining of training. Bird ringing is obviously a pretty highly skilled activity, and takes a reasonably long time, to develop those skills and operate independently. And previously we had a model where effectively you had to know how to do everything theoretically before you could do anything independently. Now that's not the case. There's a system where people can streamline their activities and specialize. And we're also investing in systems like online maps to put experts in touch with those who want to obtain information on specialist taxon or catching methods and the like. So really enforcing that peer-to-peer training potential as well. Thinking more in terms of data collection now, looking at launching new projects. So we had a period in the 90s where we were very active in launching targeted projects. There was a bit less happening in the 2000s and 2010s, but we actually took advantage of COVID, with all our volunteers being confined to quarters, to start to fill the demographic gaps in urban areas. And we both developed the Nesting Neighbours project, which is essentially simplified nest recording in gardens. And we also moved the Constant Effort Site scheme, Ringing, which provides data on productivity and survival into gardens as well. And another new project we've piloted in the last few years under the partnership is looking at winter ringing, to see whether we can get the same sort of demographic information from that we can in breeding season ringing, which can be more challenging because birds are generally more dispersed. And that's looking very promising too. So moving on to the other achievements, which are more analytical focused. One of the fantastic things that's developed in the last decade has been the program of work around climate change and climate modelling. And that's taken a variety of forms. We had a great partnership with CEH and the Space Project, looking at really the impacts of the magnitude and the impacts of phenological disjunction across trophic levels and across habitats as well. We've had another fantastic partnership with Edinburgh University, using mostly nest record scheme data to look at mechanisms of adaptation. So whether birds are phenotypically plastic, or actually there's more local adaptation, which has ramifications for how they will be able to cope with the climate if the change continues as forecast. And there's also a sort of whole array of one-off studies as well, using ADS data to look at migrant fattening strategies, body condition, food availability, and the like. And then going on to the final bullet, which is more about the applied outputs, which we're really pleased to be able to. I think that's the biggest growth area probably in terms of our outputs within ADS in the last decade. And I've just highlighted a few there. Some fantastic work by colleagues looking at protected area efficacy, showing that bird populations were more robust, probably due to increased breeding success in protected areas, some bird populations. We've used the nest record data a lot to look at breeding season length, which can then inform policy decisions around things like hedge cutting dates and moorland burning and things like this. And recently there's been a lot of use of the ADS data around identifying the risks involved in avian influenza, basically looking at mapping studies to look at incursion and probability of incursion in different areas at different times of year, and also looking at recoveries from the public, so of dead birds from the public, to actually get some sort of seasonality and annual trends in reporting rates, in mortality rates, which acts as a bit of an early warning system in terms of the taxa that are being most impacted by HPAI, which obviously does vary between years. So that's that. Excellent. So on to the aspirations. I'm just working out if I can move those forwards. Yes, so we've already touched on it here. Nikki has becoming more inclusive. We're very fortunate to have secured some funding from JNCC this year to look at recruitment and retention rates in the ringing scheme in relation to gender, to see if there are any glass ceilings there. We've also recently circulated a questionnaire to all volunteers about barriers to women in ringing that had over 500 responses, which we're just digesting now, and we're planning to do something very similar about barriers to the LGBTQ+ community in ringing before the end of this calendar year. Obviously hugely important from a moral perspective, but actually also very much from a practical perspective as well. Analytically, one of the key gaps that we're hoping to address in the next 10 years of ADS is around first year survival and recruitment. This is a very important parameter in terms of population trajectories, but very hard to get a handle on due to post-juvenile dispersal. But Rob's been doing some great work looking at recovery data, recovery reports from the public to look at first year survival rates. And we're also planning to look at recruitment in terms of the number of first year birds relative to full adult breeding in some of our structured surveys such as CES and RAS. For non-passerines, we really want to kind of build on the models really of the Scottish Raptor Monitoring Scheme and the Seabird Monitoring Programme to bring together concurrent census monitoring and demographic monitoring, anything that's territory based, so works well for raptors and waders and wildfowl as well. And finally, I think two points that are really about maximising the value of the bird in the hand and relate to sampling. So again, Rob, in terms of disease, Rob Robinson's been doing some excellent work around Asutu of late, which we may hear about in a bit. And we've got a range of developmental ideas for improving disease monitoring generally, from improving the data capture functionality, the sort of building on the mortality and reporting and the risk mapping that I've already touched upon, but also essentially really what we'd like to do is establish a series of sentinel sites where we can look at incursion and rates of infection across time. And finally, obviously sampling birds in the hand also gives population genetic potential, and you know, really we would like to see a move towards more routine sampling there. We're talking to several organisations about using their biobanking facilities at the moment, and really using informational genetics to look at source sink dynamics, dispersal, and connectivity, which are again all key questions when it comes to how birds are going to cope with environmental change, and indeed how our mitigation measures might help them do that. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Ellie. That was a great update. We were going to use the timer function for speakers, but it doesn't seem to be available for this meeting. So please can speakers keep a bit of an eye on the time and try and stick to their 5 minutes, or we'll run very, very much over time. Thanks very much for that update, Ellie. The next speaker we're going to hear from is Rob Robinson, who's the Associate Director of Research at BTO, who's going to be talking to us about DRAMs.
Yeah, do you move the slides, Nikki, or
yes,
can I do that? You
do
it.
I'll move it, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the first question I get asked when I say I'm involved in DRAMs as part of the partnership is, what the hell is it? Because it's not a scheme in its own right. Rather, it's a mechanism to bring together the results of all the different schemes that the BTO organises. And the sort of the flowchart you can see on the left here sort of highlights that. So the schemes in red are the ones that are supported by JNCC. The other schemes are sort of more run by BTO and other partners. And the idea of these schemes is that we get a whole life cycle picture of bird populations. So all the way from abundance through to the sort of the factors that impact that. So survival and breeding success in particular, and we can use these to feed population models, which I'll sort of talk a little bit about, and bring in environmental and land use data to try and provide what I've sort of grandly termed management advice, but basically to improve our understanding of populations and what we can and how we can improve status. And if I can have the next graphic. And I think one of the main achievements of the DRAMS program is the Bird Trends Explorer. And like a numpty, I didn't actually put the web link on here, but maybe we could share that later. But basically, it's a way of bringing together all of the information from the constituent schemes into one place, and also to provide some interpretation around that in terms of what we think are the most likely causes of bird population change. And in terms of aspirations, what we have plans that we're sort of starting to develop is to make this this website much more interactive, so that people can get much closer to the sort of the data they need for casework or what have you. And this has been an ongoing process. The first iteration of this was produced in the 1990s. It was a paper book that we had to publish every year. We did that for 3 years, and then realized that the online presentation allowed us much more flexibility, and that's what we're seeing today. If I can have the next slide, please, Nikki. So just to sort of put that into practice, and I apologise, the graph and the lines here seem to have got slightly askew. So the red and the blue lines should sort of overlay those black lines. But the main point here is this is a lapwing, and this is the long-term population trend from CBC and latterly BBS, so all JNCC funded surveys. And the abundance shows that it was broadly stable through the 70s and 80s. It declined through the 90s, and then has been stable since. And this, which is a common pattern for many farmland birds. And this decline in the 1980s and early 1990s was caused by a run of cold winters, so a chance event, if you like. And you can see, or you could see, if the lines were in the proper place, that survival decreased during that period because basically the birds couldn't find food. However, the interesting thing is that once the run of cold winters finished, which is sort of indicated by the arrows at the bottom there, survival bounced back up to exactly what it was, but the population stayed stable. And the question is, why is that? And thank you, Nikki. And the answer to this is changes in nest survival. Basically, there's been a gradual decline in nest survival over time. Before the population declined, the birds were able to cope with it because they had reasonably high survival. But since the population declined, there just hasn't been enough chick productivity to sort of boost the population to try to get it back to where it was before. So actually, the decline in lapwings and some other farmland birds will have been a combination of two events: a sort of a chance event, a run of cold winters, and then then a sort of a more general decline in nest survival. So it's that interaction. And the aspirations that we hope is that we can use this to really get a more sort of predictive sense of what populations are doing. And this bottom graph, which is slightly cryptic, is a sort of a graph for curlew, so also a wader, but it shows population growth rate in the colours in relation to adult survival and numbers of chicks raised. If you have high adult survival, high numbers of chicks, you have an increase in population indicated by blue, and if you have low chicks and low survival, you have population decline indicated by green. But the key point is that we can work out which rates you need for a stable population. We can then work out which rates we might be able to influence, and that's sort of illustrated by the margin there, the sort of the recorded productivity. And you can see that sort of the black dot is where we are now. You can see the productivity is low, but if we increase it a little bit, we can get to a stable population, and that's well within the recorded range. So that's sort of informing all the work the BTO is doing in terms of head starting curlew and trying to increase curlew productivity. So we can use the large-scale schemes to help direct real conservation effort. And I think I've probably run out of time, so I'll leave it there, but I'm very happy to take some questions towards the end.
Thanks, Rob. And yes, please do use the concept board, which Rosie's just posted the link for on the chat, if you can see the chat, to ask any questions to Rob as well. Thanks very much, Rob. The next speaker is Jill Birtles from BTO, who is the Webs Counter Network Organiser, and you've got until 10:32. Jill, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yep, I will run through this. So looking back at sort of the previous few years of Webs, in 2017 we celebrated 70 years with a lovely sort of gathering of local organisers and volunteers and supporters at Martin Mere. And then in sort of another development that we've had is we introduced our first annual volunteer local organiser Zoom meeting in 2021. So we started having these annual meetings of getting our local organisers and who help us organise the survey throughout the UK together to give updates, to keep them connected. And we just had our 5th meeting last week, which was another successful meeting. We've been looking to improve data entry with our Webs Online portal. So one of those improvements in 2020 was introducing the import function from BirdTrack so that our volunteers don't have to sort of submit 2 bird lists. They can submit into BirdTrack and then pull it across to Webs Online. And that way we can potentially get some more people involved with Webs who are already doing BirdTrack lists. We're developing more survey add-ons, so we've introduced age-sex ratio recording with our core counts, recording of dead or sick birds, Webs roost assessment, so we're kind of building up the data that we collect through our core counts. We've also done a few sort of major outputs with our annual trends and site totals, so we've had Webs alert assessments for SSIs and SPAs, with the waterbird features. So we did that in 2019 and then 2025. Those same years we published population estimates, and we're doing sort of continual research on changing distributions, Arctic indicators, and the impacts and risks of avian influenza. So looking at our aspirations on the next slide. So we are sort of the kind of very immediate thing that we are looking towards in our future, which we haven't included in this slide, is the next 5-year agreement with Webs. So we'll be sort of negotiating the 5-year agreement that will start in 2027 with our partners, RSPB, JNCC and BTO. So in 2 weeks we have a stakeholder workshop. So we're kind of bringing together all sorts of different stakeholders for Webs to kind of gather ideas about things that we can include in that 5-year agreement and things that we want to aspire to do within that 5-year period. We're also hoping to develop single visits. So we have a lot of wetland sites that are quite difficult to get counters to do monthly counts at. You know, they could be quite difficult to access, could be upland water bodies or sort of long riverine sections. So we're hoping to introduce single visits so that we can get, if someone happens to be passing by, they can submit a single visit. And of course, getting sort of one-off data is always still good for us, rather than sort of just having no data for that site for a long time. We are also looking to support our volunteers taking on more challenging sites. We're finding that it's quite difficult to find replacement surveyors for our challenging sites like estuary sites or large reservoirs, that kind of thing. We're very lucky that we have dedicated volunteers who will give us decades of their time and become experts at these sites, but we do find that we have a real gap when those counters eventually come to retire. So we're looking to sort of support kind of our current volunteers taking over those difficult sites for us. We are continuing to improve Webs Online for our local organisers and our supporters, so we're kind of always kind of looking for feedback on how we can improve it. And kind of on the trend of what we have been doing, we're looking to increase recording via those add-ons. So and especially with particular emphasis of supporting particular research and policy needs. So we're thinking sort of age ratios for Arctic wader productivity, sex recording for research and differences between pochard, sex survival rates, sort of various things like that that are listed there. And then lastly, we are looking to enable research into policy priority needs. So thinking waterbird use of functioning land to SPAs, condition of protected sites and whether birds are fit for breeding after wintering on them, and then sort of those drivers of change. So yeah, that's sort of a quick run through of our aspirations there. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Jill. That was great. Next up, we have Martin Harvey discussing the Biological Records Centre. Martin's a Research Associate for Scientific Data Support from the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. And you've got until 10:37, please, Martin.
Thanks, Nikki. Good morning, everybody. So over the past 10 years, these... Oh, sorry, I thought it was a... Can we mute the background noise?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find who it is.
Okay, so over the past 10 years, these are the some highlights that we've picked out. Biological Records Centre has been running since the 1960s, and throughout that period, we've worked very closely with the national recording schemes. These are the focus here is on the unstructured recording across a very wide range of taxonomic groups, and over the past 10 years the number of schemes has increased. These are all, of course, very much dependent on their volunteers. Many are entirely volunteer led and volunteer run, and it's been fantastic to see these schemes continue and increase over that time period. One of the things that BRC does to support the recording schemes is to maintain online recording infrastructure through the Indicia software and the iRecord system, which help bring together data into one place where it can be checked and verified and more efficiently shared. And the process of sharing this data, one of the main routes for that is via the National Biodiversity Network Atlas. And we now have a more or less automated monthly update to the NBN Atlas, which does seem to have been successful in increasing the speed and extent of data flow for these species records. Alongside that, BRC has done a lot of work over the years on developing statistical approaches to how the unstructured records can be understood and used and fed into the wide range of uses that they can be applied to, including biodiversity indicators and red lists and many other uses. And alongside that, there are many wider research and scientific analyses of that data and research papers published from that. So I think those are some of the sort of highlights from the past 10 years. And perhaps if we move on to looking forwards to the next 10 years. Yep. By its nature, biological recording and monitoring is an ongoing thing, which will always require sort of the continued maintenance and liaison and support, and we very much hope to continue doing that, and to support the systems that allow records to be collected and checked, and that data quality aspect of this is something that we see as very important in this process. And also providing guidance on which data is actually most needed for the uses to which we need to put it, and whether there's more that we can do to target the type of recording that people are doing so that it has the biggest impact and adds the most value. Widening participation in recording is very much part of this process, and work has been going on and continues to be developed on how recorder motivations feed into this and how the technology we use can support a more inclusive approach to participation in biological recording. There's lots of innovation at the moment. It's an exciting time to be involved in all this, and the new data streams such as environmental DNA or automated monitoring throw up many exciting possibilities and also questions as to how this relates to the more traditional way of recording. So further focus on data analysis and interpretation to try and make sense of all this and make strong links to the drivers of environmental change that we are ultimately trying to assess and predict. And I think the overall sort of term that we would like to ensure we maintain over the next 10 years is resilience in this network. It is a large and complex network that depends on many parts, including a huge input from volunteers, and we very much hope and intend and need to continue developing methods that will allow us to sustain this amazing activity into the future.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Martin. That was great. And bang on time. Next up, we are hearing from James Hayward from BTO, who is the BBS National Organiser. So over to you, James, until 10:42. Please. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks, everybody. So the first achievement is the recent publication of the BBS data paper. So having BBS data freely available, and that's raw count data as opposed to analysed outputs, was a big moment. It has the potential to open up the resource to a much wider range of people with onward potential impacts for conservation. And amongst other things, we hope that this will lead to a great deal more of item number 2, which is research. And even before making the BBS data freely available, the existing outputs of BBS include important work on climate change, farmland research, and, as we've heard before, some work on protected areas. A rough count, and I'm sure this is a minimum estimate, is at least 105 peer-reviewed publications have come from BBS data in the last decade. But of course, those data that support those things need to come from somewhere, and the decade has shown a number of different kind of record coverages, both at the UK level, which comes from this year, but also in each of the 4 countries of the UK. So in England in 2018, Northern Ireland 21, Wales this year, and Scotland in 2022. The Scotland record in particular, which goes on to item number 4, if you wouldn't mind, Nikki, represents an innovation, and that is the development of our so-called Upland Rover scheme, which was a promotion of essentially of a relaxation of our standard protocol in an attempt to fill a gap which we recognised in our habitat and geographical coverage, allowing single visits and higher observer turnover in the Scottish uplands in particular. To complete the cycle, all of these data and the volunteers who collect it need to be supported, and the last decade has shown a tremendous amount of development in our BBS online web application, and we've seen a number of developments here, improving how different groups of people can be managed, both by staff at BTO, but also BTO's tremendous regional network, how those individuals interact with each other, and also how we maintain data quality, all done through this online system. So those are the achievements. Our ambitions for the year, to what extent we can continue to use the existing data streams, but also thinking about how we use other methods. And of course, we've had a brief mention of acoustics. For example, will we ever see a BBS will we ever see a trend for a species like greenshank, which might be a combined human and acoustic trend? It is one question that we're particularly keen to try and answer. As well as collecting data from other sources, we want to be able to collect at different scales and use it at different scales. So at present, along with several of the schemes that we're going to hear from today, we support the Tracking the Impact project, but at the moment, its data doesn't contribute to national outputs. And so it's being able to both support and use data collected at a local scale is something we're very keen to do. The third item is a more technical one, which is to identify the possibility and practicality of introducing additional strata within our sampling design, which would facilitate the increased coverage of scarce habitats. So, for example, reed beds, heathlands, mature forest, and so on, and increase the number of species that BBS can cover. For example, like this Dartford warbler here. The fourth ambition, again, another technical one, taking advantage of some of the BBS detectability data that our volunteers collect, and potentially alongside BTO's Atlas, which will be running for 5 years, starting from next winter, 2 winters time, sorry, to map breeding bird densities and estimate population sizes directly from using BBS data. And finally, there have already been some examples of how BBS data can be used to predict the future. For example, recent use by RSPB of BBS data in predicting the effects of different land use changes in relation to renewables. To what extent can BBS data be used more widely in a predictive way? So that's it, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. That was great. Next, we are passing on to Mark Eaton, who is the Secretary of the UK Rare Breeding Birds Panel. Over to you, Mark, until 10:47.
Okay, thank you very much. So starting with some achievements, the first is maybe a little passive, simply reaching an anniversary, but I thought it's worth flagging how long we've been going. And we used the occasion of our 50th anniversary in 23 to raise our profile, create some valuable outputs, papers in British wildlife and British birds, allowing us to showcase what the RBPP does and the value of our work, and dive down into this data a little bit. And we held an online conference over 2 nights, which was very well attended, over 300 people, and well received. And this is something we'll repeat in the future. We've managed a 30% increase in the volume of data submitted to us over the last 10 years. We've done well in improving data flows, in particular engaging on the issue of data being submitted as not as county and area totals, encourage more site-specific data to be submitted, because this finer scale data is far more valuable. And continual communication with the recording community has allowed more complete geographical coverage, fewer missing submissions gaps in the recording network. Every year since the sort of slump through COVID, we've made a new record in the number of unique records being compiled. The most recent report published earlier this month drew on 7,800 unique records. We've been working through a program of improvements to our GIS database and the historical data set. So 50 years of different data management processes moving progressively from paper files to a GIS have left our data set with a range of issues around missing records, duplicates, definitions of geographical features. Thanks to additional funding from JNCC, Natural England and RRW, some mainly underspent, we've been focused on cleaning our GIS features over the last 5 years. So things like merging duplicate sites, ensuring features are defined at the appropriate scale, has been done in fits and starts over the last 5 years, and will be completed this winter, resulting in a substantial improvement in the value of our data, and also some substantial benefits for the processing of incoming data. We have a new website, which Mark Holling, the secretary prior to me, completed before his retirement. There's still elements of that we want to develop, more information on the species that we work on, for example, but that was a good step forward. I think we've done quite well. I think probably all schemes can say this. They've adapted to new ways and opportunities of communicating. Twitter and Blue Sky, for example, important tools for us. We post lots of videos on a YouTube account, and I've given back of the envelope over 100 talks, online talks over the last 5 years. So we're pretty active. And I think we've done quite well, finally, in achievements in ensuring that our data are available for use by conservation organisations. It's important to make good use of this across conservation and research communities. There's a number of aspects to this. I mean, ensuring the data is the highest quality, as we have been doing over the last few years, is valuable, being responsive to requests. We could improve on this, we could automate elements of this, but we prioritise fulfilling data requests within our work programme, and our internal processes to make sure that we make appropriate decisions about providing data. And I'll move on. So some aspirations. We want to continue that increasing trend in data. We hope continuing our communication will increase data flows, ensuring more records are submitted, but also more effort to collect data in the first instance. And we want to take a more strategic approach to that, putting focus on particular areas and species, which, when coupled with new analytical approaches, will enable us to monitor more species. The bird atlases in the past have been very important for the RBBP, and we want to work very closely with the BTO over the next atlas. Gives great opportunities to improve coverage, but I think what is even more valuable, and perhaps we haven't grasped quite fully previously, is the opportunity to engage and secure a permanent improvement in effort and reporting after the period of the forthcoming Atlas. Develop new statistical approaches. We're working with Prof. Steve Willis at Durham, with co-supervising a student, Faiza Fatamizadeh, who's working with our data. She'll be looking at drivers of change in rare breeding birds, looking at things like climate, one of Steve's interests, but also in how to address spatial and temporal biases within our, what is basically ad hoc data, to produce more robust trends and for more species than we do currently. We want to improve our guidance on monitoring methods. There are a few gaps in knowledge and the sharing of that knowledge on monitoring methods. Some of the advice is rather dated now, can be patchy and difficult to source, and there's some gaps around new technologies like drone use, thermal imagers. So we want to provide better information and work with others who are involved in bird monitoring together to provide that. And finally, we want to get our data used more and generate more outputs. We have a huge resource. I'll continue to put in a great deal of effort into improving that resource, both in the cleaning of historical data and improving what flows into us every year. We have a long-term data set now. Now we've been 50 years worth. We've got over 200,000 records in there, heading towards 250,000. So we want to encourage more use of this, more development of the sort of things that Pfizer's doing in her PhD, and use for directly guiding conservation action. And that's enough for me. Hopefully that was just 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. That's all great to hear. I think we've got a double act coming up next to hear about the UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme of Ian Middlebrook, the Butterfly Monitoring Coordinator from Butterfly Conservation, and David Roy, the Head of Biological Records Centre in the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. Over to you until 10:53. Please.
Thanks, Nikki. Right, I'm just going to run through the celebrations from the last 10 years. So, like the previous speaker, we've just celebrated our 50th survey season, and we celebrated that with a conference. And despite being around for so long, we do continue to grow. So 10 years ago, we had 2,500 sites being monitored each year, and that's now over 3,500. So that's great news. It's also very important to us that our data is valued and recognised, and with that in mind, a couple of years ago we got the seal of approval from the Office for Statistics Regulation. So our data feeds into the UK biodiversity indicators and has fed into the EU nature restoration law through the European grassland butterfly indicator. We continue to develop new field methodologies, so not all butterfly species are best monitored through our standard transect methodology. So we've been developing new methodologies for priority species, such as brown hairstreak and purple hairstreak, and more recently, northern brown argus, and also surveys for immature stages of black hairstreak using ultraviolet torches. And then digitization. So our data entry website was launched just over 10 years ago, but the development of that website has enabled us to handle the ever-growing data volume that we receive each year. So I think this year, 99% of our transect data would have been submitted through the online data entry website, which is great news. And also the iRecord Butterflies app has been developed to incorporate data entry for time counts for priority species, which is also great news. And then from a sort of diversity and inclusion point of view, a couple of years ago, we conducted a survey of our volunteers to get to understand the demographic of our volunteers and to get a baseline against which we can measure progress in terms of increasing the diversity of our volunteer base. And we've been improving the accessibility of some of our guidance and training aids by producing how-to videos for people who are happier with visual media rather than reading through sort of texty volumes of guidance notes. And I will hand over to David to go through our aspirations.
Thanks, Ian, and morning, everybody. So I'm going to cover the aspirations looking forward. So as Ian said, we've got a baseline of our participation. We've got some obvious skews in terms of age, etc. So we want to diversify participation to better represent society, but also for the benefits it brings to the schemes, and that's particularly, attracting younger people from different ethnic backgrounds, for example. As Ian said, we've made a lot of strides in terms of moving the whole data side of the UK BMS online to collect, review, and share data, including some regular publications of data sets on an annual basis. But what we've done less of is use that resource of sort of real-time data collection to give feedback to volunteers during the season to appreciate their efforts, but also to motivate continued recording. We report on all but one of the UK butterfly species, so we don't report regularly on mountain ringlet at the UK scale. So as Ian said, we're looking at methods and approaches to ensure to make us able to report on all UK butterfly species, both the UK level but also country and regional level, and that includes targeting spatial gaps, but also development of new methods, as Ian's mentioned, to increase how we monitor species which aren't necessarily well suited to the main method that we currently use, which is line transects. We publish indicators regularly as at the UK and country level. We want to expand that to include all countries, so have an official indicator for Wales and Northern Ireland, for example, but also think about how we can produce other indicators to measure the status of butterfly in different contexts. So we've done some preliminary work on an urban butterfly indicator, so we'd like to extend that work to increase the impact of the scheme. And finally, the scheme's grown rapidly, and we want to maintain that level of participation and support those volunteers well, but we also want to evolve the recording participation, and particularly be strategic and targeted in where we look to support growth in the scheme going forward. And that's linked to our aspirations to diversified participation, but also to target under-recorded geographic areas and under-recorded habitats, for example. Thanks.
Thanks very much, David and Ian. Lots of great celebrations and aspirations there. Next up, we've got Dawn Barmer, who's going to be talking about the seabird monitoring programme, and Dawn is the head of surveys at BTO. Over to you, Dawn. You've got 10:59, please.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks very much. So our achievements over the last sort of few years has actually been setting up a new partnership agreement with JNCC and associate partner RSPB. So this has been a really exciting partnership since we took the scheme over in 2022. So previous to that, JNCC had been running the scheme, so that's been great news. Like many other schemes, we've been doing a lot of work to improve the experience for our participants. So we've been doing a lot of work on our SMP online, where we enter the data, making it more user-friendly to use. A lot of work around site allocation, allowing the participants to be able to map the spatial of their site, so we can actually see the areas being counted, which is particularly important for sort of coastline sites. And been doing a lot of work around the database and site definition. So this is ongoing work, actually. It's still a lot to do in that area. I hope we've been engaging with our participants really well. So as well as sort of emails we get in the spring to encourage us to go out and do our seabird monitoring and thank you emails in the autumn, we've been doing a lot of work on social media, on various platforms, and we've been producing a very popular annual newsletter with contributions from participants as well, and that's been a great way of getting people involved and really building up the seabird monitoring community. I'd also like to think we've sort of transformed the annual report. So previously it was quite a sort of long-winded website, and hopefully we've made it a very engaging, it's a PDF format at the moment, but we've included a lot of photos, written the text in an engaging way, so really trying to make it accessible for a very wide a range of readers, so obviously the participants, but also providing all the official stats that are needed for the stakeholders that use it too. We've also been doing lots of work around the trends. So we inherited something called the Wizard, which was a bit of a mystery. So one of the first jobs to do was have a look at the sort of the code behind that and convert that to R. So we were then able to replicate the trends in R, which was a great step forward. So we knew exactly how the trends were being produced. And then more recently, we've been finding a way of making those trends better, so producing more robust trends. And we've just had a piece of work go out for peer review, which has just come back as recommending basically reinforcing the recommendations we're making. Thanks. Next slide. So in terms of aspirations, I think really top of our list is having a new user-friendly handbook. I think it was 1995 or something like that. The last handbook was produced, so it's quite out of date and is something we're actively working on at the moment. This is a piece of work outside our S&P funding, so we've been finding new funding sources to take that forward. And it'll be important to use, include where possible, novel surveying methods as well. So going back to those methods, so we've now had that peer review report back recommending we move forward on our new methods for producing trends in abundance of productivity. So we're going to be taking that forward very soon. We'd love to be able to expand and increase participation of S&P inland and coastal sites. I think to do that, we need a really good engaging handbook, which, as I say, top of our list. So volunteers have got something good to work with. Aspirations also include producing reports on the SPAs, very much like the WEBS alerts, which are sort of periodic 6-year reports on the sort of the state of the seabirds at particular sites. I think that could be really valuable piece of work. And also, talking about barriers to participation, there's definitely barriers around seabird participation, partly, where they are very often very inaccessible, but also just having the skills to count literally thousands and thousands of seabirds and coastal sites, and to work around productivity, which is a bit more intensive. So I think we can do a lot to provide some hands-on training for our volunteers. So that's me. Thanks.
Thanks, Dawn. That's perfect. That's all great to hear. Next up, we've got Neil Calbraid, who's going to be talking about the Goose and Swan Monitoring Programme, and Neil is the Waterbird Surveys Officer from BTO. Over to you, Neil, until 11:04, please.
Okay, thank you. So for those of you who don't know what JSMP is, it's basically a suite of different species-specific surveys for geese and swans. So it was originally organised by WWT, and then we took it over in 2022. So before we took it over, there's been various periodic surveys of Greenland barnacle geese, which NatureScott did, international swan census, which WWT carried out, and there's also annual surveys such as the Icelandic breeding goose census, which is the IGC, which is an annual thing that's been going on since 1960. So as I say, we took it over in 2022, and we had to re-establish all our volunteer local organisers and counter date networks. We didn't get much from WWT in that regard, and also new branding. So we've had a lot of work to do with the handover, and then transferring the WWT database into the BTO database to make it integrated with other BTO surveys. And we've closely aligned it with WEBS, since the two surveys work very similar. So we've used the same database location structure to build our database to make it work. And the data is obviously very useful. It was used. We had the 2021-22 outbreak of HPAI up on the Solway estuary, which wiped out a lot of the Svalbard barnacle goose population up there. And so GSMP data, we had there's somebody up there has been doing surveys of that population for many years. So we had lots of good run of data, and he was out there monitoring those birds, so we were able to see in real time what the effects were. And we've also integrated the reporting of JSMP into WEBS Online, into WEBS Reporting Online interface. So we now have, we've always had the the IGC counts and some of the censuses as supplementary counts on there, but we now have a specific ratios tab for things like age assessments, which we've only started populating, but we're hoping to build on this in the future. And then looking forward, it's basically a bad time for in terms of in terms of the cycle. We haven't started our stakeholder and partnership negotiations yet, which we're going to be doing for the next contract in the next month or so. But a few things that we would like to do looking forward. We are looking to review the analytical methods of age assessments and also sense estimates such as pink feet. We inherited the ones from that WWT used, but we want to use. We've been looking at different models to see if we can just basically if we can get it in more a bit more robust. We're hoping to. I would like to get more training for volunteers. Obviously, goose and swan age assessments are not a particularly easy thing to do. Some people love doing them, some people find them very difficult. So we'd like to do a lot more, get a lot more people getting out doing them and training them. So, as I say, it is quite a challenge. Even I struggle with some of the pink feet and the grey legs that we get. The international swan census has now moved to a 6-yearly cycle, and the next one is going to be next January. So, if anybody wants to go out and count Hooper and Buick swans, then go on to the GSMP website, and we can find out how to do it. And so this is going to be so we've been spending most of this year organising the building up the database and the counter network and things for this. So that's the next thing coming up in January. We need there's a lot of work going on with Icelandic colleagues on Icelandic grey-lag geese, because the population that we get that comes over from Iceland every winter, but they mix with our native grey-lags, so the populations aren't distinguishable in the field. So there's a lot of work going on with satellite tagging and other ways of trying to find out exactly how many of these Icelandic grey-lags come over here to get a better population estimate. So that's something that's ongoing. And also, we'd like to develop SPA alerts for geese and swans using GSMP data, because, as Jill said, we do webs alerts for websites, but these for all these SPAs we're using webs data, but geese and swans are not particularly well monitored by webs. So we would like to be able to basically improve the SPA designation alerts for using GSMP data. I think I came under my 5 minutes.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Neil. Yes, you did. That's all great to hear. Next up, we've got Philip Briggs, who is the monitoring manager of the National Bat Monitoring Programme from Bat Conservation Trust. Over to you, Philip, until 11:09, please. Thank you.
So you need to just click for each one. Great. Okay, so BBAT stands for British Bat Survey, and it's our first GB-wide survey using passive acoustic monitoring. Volunteers put out audio moths for 2 periods of 5 nights in July at locations selected from a randomly generated sample of 1 kilometre squares, stratified by land cover type and region. And after a few pilot years, we officially launched BBAT in 2024. And the acoustic recordings are processed through our sound classification system, which we developed in collaboration with UCL and University of Edinburgh. And it uses the gold standard training sets of calls recorded from bats where the species identity is known. And across different projects, our SES is now classifying several hundred terabytes of data a year. Okay, then going on to Night Watch. So this uses the same technology as BBATs, but the methodology is tailored for engaging new audiences with a particular focus on underrepresented audiences such as people from ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, and people living in more urban areas with less connection to green spaces. So the volunteers simply put out an audio moth for a single night in a location of their choice and watch for an hour at the location, noting down any visual observations of nocturnal wildlife. And we've enlisted local coordinators who run engagement events within their regions, and these have proved very successful in engaging new audiences. So on to DEI. So over the last few years, we've had an increasing focus on DEI across BCT as well as specifically within the NBMP. A couple of JNCC funded projects have been particularly valuable and have included running focus groups with people from underrepresented audiences. So really finding out about their specific interests and motivations and the barriers to taking part and how we could address these. And key learning has included the importance of going out to different communities rather than expecting them to come to us, and the importance of co-creation when it comes to activities and resources. And we've published a couple of reports from this work on our website. And in the last couple of years, we've started calculating 5-year trends as well as long-term trends. And these have been very revealing in identifying statistically significant short-term declines in a few species where the long-term trends show an increase. And this provides us with warning signs that the fortunes of these species may be changing. And then on to genomic work. So Dr. Orly Razgor led a collaboration between academics and conservation practitioners, including obesity staff, to develop molecular approaches capable of providing evidence of historic population changes in bat species. And this started with looking at barbastelle. And it showed a decline in barbastelle populations in Britain of 99% over the past 330 to 448 years. So we now have a method that can be used for other species, and we're really keen to look at historic changes in populations of more common species such as common pipistrelle and brown long-eared bat, and this will fill a really large evidence gap. Okay, so on to aspirations. So our aspiration for the British Bat Survey is that it will deliver statistically robust species population trends for a wide range of species and habitat types at the GB country and regional scales, and based on verified results from our sound classification system, we're already starting to collect data on species we don't currently monitor through the MBMP, such as barbastelle and Nethusius pipistrelle, and from habitats that are under-recorded in our long-running surveys, such as upland areas. And we've started exploring using eDNA for identifying species at sites. So we've done some work at Hibernacular. Our ultimate goal would be to sample open habitats such as woodlands and know which species of bat are using that woodland. And this will be particularly beneficial for the cryptic species that are tricky to monitor using other means. And then we just want to get the most value out of our sound classification system. So, for example, seeing how we can support bat groups using the system and add other algorithms to the system. For example, we've developed our own woodland soundscape algorithm. So we currently produce trends based on relative abundance data, but all our trend data is geo-referenced. And in future, we would like to also look at trends in distribution or occupancy, which would be another really good kind of metric of how species are faring. And then finally, we'd like to integrate all our monitoring into one package. So we currently have separate portals for our core MBMP surveys and our passive acoustic monitoring surveys, and also our beginner level sunset survey where the online recording is hosted on iRecord. So we'd really like to bring these all together into one package to create a more seamless experience for volunteers who participate across these different segments of the MBMP. And also when we were kind of consulting with our online recording users when developing it recently, there were lots of really nice ideas of the kind of outputs we could produce from it, which would be really motivating and interesting to volunteers. So we're kind of really looking to get funding to develop some of those as well. That's it from me.
Thanks very much, Philip. That was great. We're running slightly behind time. We've got 2 more talks to go, and we will still have a break after that, just to reassure you. But next up, we have Jasmine Salvati, who is going to be talking about the National Plant Monitoring Scheme. And Jasmine is a monitoring ecologist from the Joint Nature Conservation Committee, JNCC. Over to you, Jasmine, until 11:15, please.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. I just got a bit of a weird notification. So this year, the NPMS celebrated our 10th anniversary. We launched 10 years ago, which is perfectly in time for these celebrations, which is really lovely. We So the first full field season was in 2015, so it's the 10-year anniversary of data collection, and we celebrated with an online conference, which was very well received. We had some amazing talks by some of the people attending this talk today, so thank you very much for that. Another thing that we're really celebrating is that our digital access offerings are ever improving and ever being developed. That particularly includes our NPMS app, which makes it a lot easier for in-field recording for all of our volunteers. A massive focus of the NPMS is our DEI offering. So we have created additional volunteer roles, so photography volunteers, landowner permission volunteers, just 2 examples. And this kind of allows more people to get involved in different ways, but then also it benefits other volunteers and other people engaged in the scheme as well. So a new variety of photos make identification easier. Landowner permissions already being available makes it much easier for certain people to be involved. So that's all really fantastic. Our species visualizations have been launched on the website, and NPMS data are used in plants of the wider countryside of the UK biodiversity indicator. Sorry, I don't know why I'm struggling to talk. So we are ever looking to improve sort of where our data is used, how it's used, and how it's able to be viewed by a multitude of different people. But that's something that we're quite proud of. For a young scheme, we're already, I feel like, contributing a little bit. And as ever, we're always looking at how many volunteers we have, how many squares are being recorded. So we have over 1,500 volunteers. I think we hit that record in the last year, and we have 250,000 botanical records have been submitted, which is really lovely, and that was also a great celebration for our 10-year anniversary. So we are, in terms of aspirations, we're looking for all of our sort of NPMS reliant indicators to move from in development to being assessed, and we are working with DEFRA to do so. We're always looking to kind of broaden our scheme volunteer base. I think that's the same for everyone. So we're looking to expand our reach, particularly in under-recorded areas, including Northern Ireland and Scotland, and a lot of just remote locations in those areas. We're starting with a pilot project in Northern Ireland, but we're hoping to expand going forward. With digital access, we have done some amazing things, but we're always looking and always interested in doing more. So we're interested in working with all of our NCEA partners to increase resourcing for those who wish to engage with our data, like our local monitoring data, through our website, and making sure that we have all of those interpretation and analysis tools available, both for volunteers who are gathering the data, but also for end users. We are really invested in kind of building relationships with large scale landholders, sorry. So particularly we are working to get closer with the National Trust. This makes it a lot easier for our scheme to grow. These sort of large landholders have a lot of people already invested in what they're doing, but also a lot of our squares kind of are either on the edge of those land plots, or they are in them. So it makes it a lot easier for us to sort of keep on building our scheme if we can continue to build those relationships. And then finally, we have a DEI strategy, which will hopefully be published shortly. But we are continuing to work to improve our DEI offering for everyone who is involved in our scheme. So a really big step of this is going to be re-auditing our training materials and website for accessibility inclusion. This is something that we want to do fairly regularly to make sure that we're A, staying up to date, and B, making sure that we are being as inclusive to everyone as possible. And that will be one of the biggest next things that we're going to do for this scheme. So that's everything. Thank you. That was a real gallop through, but hopefully I'm still on time.
I think galloping is what we're all doing today. Lots to hear from everybody. Thanks very much, Jasmine. Last but very much not least, we're going to hear from Claire Carvell, who is the Senior Research Scientist for Pollinators at the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and Claire's going to be talking to us about the pollinator monitoring scheme, POMS. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Nikki. Good morning, everybody. So as I think the youngest of the schemes, pollinator monitoring scheme was launched in 2017. And since then, we have been very proud to expand to at least 750 annual participants in what we call the Flower Insect Time to Count survey, which is very much the sort of citizen science element part of POMS. The fit counts can be done anywhere. And so we've generated more than 25,000 counts over that period. And then with our more sort of intensive survey of a network of 1 kilometre squares, we've covered up to 75 of those across GB and introduced squares in Northern Ireland as well. And a key point of that setup being that in Northern Ireland, Scotland and England, those POMS squares overlap with the National Plant Monitoring Scheme, which gives us some exciting future potential. We have been publishing an annual report, you can see just featured in the little inset on the right there, both in English and Welsh, with JNCC since 2022, and 2022 marked the year in which we sort of joined the JNCC family of schemes, having been embedded initially within DEFRA. We've also been really pleased to have published all of the raw data generated from POMS up as far as 2022, and very, very shortly you will see the 2023 raw data, and that is available on the NERC Environmental Information Data Centre. Also this year, for the first time, we were able to publish all species records for bees and hoverflies generated from the network of 95 1 kilometre squares across the UK from POMS going back to 2017. A nice feature that we've worked at through the fit count, which I mentioned is very much the kind of more broader citizen science element of POMS, is this projects feature that has allowed us to really work a little bit more at the local scale. A lot of communities wanting to use the fit count as a means of monitoring, working together with their communities to perhaps look at particular areas. So we've worked up this kind of project feature within the fit count app, where local projects can tag their counts to their project and then have a more sort of unique identifier to look at their own data. 22 of those projects have now been signed up to POMS. And finally, we've been very fortunate to receive some additional funding from the DEFRA DNA Centre of Excellence that's allowed us to explore DNA barcoding of the pan-trap samples that are generated from the 1 kilometre square network. So that is really exciting, not only in terms of understanding insect community patterns of insect community diversity, both in space and time, but also in supporting the developing DNA reference databases such as UKBOL for some of these really understudied and often very cryptic taxa. Thanks, Nikki. So moving on to our aspirations for the coming period. So we also will enter a new phase in 2027. Our current agreement will come to an end. We're very keen, as are others, to broaden participation in POMS and to ensure that volunteers obviously feel engaged with the scheme. We've been doing some work on providing individualised feedback on fit counts this year in particular, and we're also keen to expand on a questionnaire that we ran in 2021 with the Birdsong consultancy that gave us some insights into the sort of levels of diversity and inclusion that are supported through POMS. We're keen to increase POMS coverage, probably to do this maybe a bit strategically, especially in places that are currently represented. That will be easier to do for the fit counts because our 1 kilometre survey is relatively constrained by the budget, in that it is a kind of more expensive scheme to run, in the sense that we have a lot of processing to do of samples that come back to UKCEH. So yeah, coverage most immediately to be expanded with the fit counts. And then we're working with Paul Woodcock and others at JNCC to establish annual publication of trends from POMS as official statistics. The thing that sets POMS data apart a little bit is that at the moment we're primarily publishing data at group level. So you will see trends or abundance estimates for solitary bees, bumblebees, hoverflies, etc., right up to sort of all the insect groups that we count. But as the data expands, we're looking to increase our power to be able to detect trends in species from the 1 kilometre squares as well. We are busy exploring different methods and analyses to ensure the data is relevant to different evidence needs. We've literally just advertised a PhD collaborative with Reading University today, and we're looking at integrating analyses with other insect and plant data sets. For example, the co-location with the NPMS is an exciting opportunity, and also exploring new and novel technologies, such as I mentioned, the DNA analysis through the pan-traps. This could be a really unique way of looking at whole insect community biomonitoring, which we're excited about. Finally, we're always keen to continue using the evidence from POMs to support UK pollinator strategies. And as a case in point, the pollinator plan for England is just being sort of rewritten and for a new stage of that work. And we're keen to work closely with DEFRA and the agencies on how that can be to best serve their needs. Thank you.
So Ollie is the Principal Advisor at Natural England for participatory monitoring and partnerships, and is the first of some 5-minute presentations from CNCBs about impacts of TEPoP data and uses within CNCBs, and aspirations for the future as well. So over to you, Ollie, when you're ready, please.
Great. Thanks, Nikki. Can I just check you can hear me?
Yes, yeah, and brilliant. I should say you've got until 11:33, please.
I'll be as expedient as I can be. So thanks very much, everybody. Really nice to be hearing from everybody and seeing everybody as part of this event today. So Natural England has long championed collaboration with the voluntary biological recording groups, and we really recognise their role in understanding and protecting biodiversity. My own career started with English Nature, Natural England's predecessor, in a role supporting the launch of the National Biodiversity Network Trust. And that was a fantastic opportunity for me personally to connect with voluntary groups, recording schemes and record centres right across the UK. And that's been incredibly valuable to me through my career. And it really laid the foundation of a career that's largely focused on improving the relationship between the public and voluntary sectors. TEPoP really does embody that cooperative spirit that Natural England advocates, bringing together our communities to deliver, and it has delivered, a decade of people-powered monitoring that's driving biodiversity knowledge. Next slide, please, Nikki. Yeah. So in this time, we've seen community biodiversity monitoring continues to underpin UK biodiversity indicators and policy. It's continuing to generate around 70% of data for species and evidence reporting. And that's reporting against commitments and policies and programs under the Environment Act, the Environment Improvement Plan, local nature recovery strategies, and species and site protection responsibilities. And it's underpinned the state of nature reporting, which has evidenced a 19% reduction in species on average since 1970, and the fact that 1 in 6 species are facing extinction. We've seen improvements in training and monitoring and digital tools in this period, enhancing data precision, reliability, and utility. And some significant examples for Natural England include the collaborative development of botanical heat maps with BSBI, and that's being used to determine the value of land for wood planting, which actually the sort of intelligent rapid planting has been a real challenging issue for the nature improvement community. So that data has been really valuable, and it's shown that transition from records to an insight that can be accessible and usable by the teams involved in that work. We're also now developing similar heat maps for invertebrates, beginning with butterfly conservation. We've also been working with BSBI to explore how they might help us conduct more and better botanical surveys across our protected sites. And that's something that's been in development and talk for quite a while, and it's now coming into fruition. So it's going to be really nice to see that sort of collaboration beginning to happen as well. Over the last 10 years, we've also seen more collaborative efforts between partners to better understand and strengthen evidence for nature. There've been a whole range of reviews of biological recording, species data pathways, projects for better biodiversity data, and these have been led by important community convening groups that we've also seen increasingly grow and develop. So the long-standing and continuing role of the Biological Record Centre within CEH is a really important source of support for the community. The National Biodiversity Network providing the tools to mobilise and share data. The relatively new Association of Local Environmental Record Centres providing a really important network to engage what is quite a diverse community of record centres. And the significant DEFRA research and development that's been going on under the Natural Capital and Ecosystem Assessment Programme. So much of this has been focused on improving community data, alignment, integration and pathways to impact. Next slide, please, Nikki. But there's been some great progress and achievement, but significant challenges and opportunities remain. So all of our data smarts and impact sits on a network of volunteers that the public sector continues to struggle to support strategically. There are improvements in data networks, but they don't translate to improvements in social networks. And that's something that is going to be really important to address going forward. Despite 70%, more than 70% of data coming from volunteers, the public sector and policy and programs continue to insufficiently recognise the value of the volunteering community or see how it relates to or could better integrate with our professional networks or technology. They really do continue to itemise these things, and it's unhelpful to itemise that capability. And that's another thing we're going to have to deal with. Next slide, please, Nikki. So these two challenges kind of frame what I see as our ambition, Natural England's ambition for the next 10 years. And there are some significant things for our collective communities to engage in this. And not all of them are comfortable, but there are a whole host here. So we're really coming from a position of conserving species. That's what we're driven by. We love nature. That's why most of us are in the roles we're in or volunteering in the way we volunteer. But from a policy perspective, we're kind of transitioning towards conserving ecosystems. It's not that we're letting go of conserving species, but it's a change in threat and a change in our response to that threat. So the environmental threat and response is always and is continuing to change. Natural England is leaning into improving the nation's recognition of and investment in ecosystem functions that underpin the prosperity of nature and us. So that our society, our public communities, business, industry and government will have recognised the role of nature in those systems. And this will have implications for how we prioritise data going forward, and also opportunities and challenges around wider community engagement. The second bit is pathways to impact. So being smarter about why we need to study nature or understand nature leads to a smarter how we do it. And much of my work is responding to this broadening environmental interest and community engagement. Rather than assume what we need, we've started going back to basics and consulting both national experts and stakeholders at local and national levels on why we need to study nature. Why does our nation need to study nature? And what do we need to understand, and how are we currently doing this? And we've been mapping this through a series of community survey frameworks that are beginning to set out what we think collectively we need to understand and what we're collecting at the moment that are contributing towards that understanding. That leads on to collaborative monitoring. So under the NCEA, there's been quite a lot of work involved in this, but there's also outside of that, there is increasing collaboration, and we'll see over the next period a sort of more promotion around a UK community advancing nature's evidence. And this is a collection of stakeholders coming together, and many of us here today looking to work together more collaboratively going forward. NCEA itself.
Ollie, can I just rush you a tiny bit?
Yeah, sorry, Nikki. I was
Thank
thinking
you.
I was going to be so quick through this, and I'm yeah. So very quickly, I think that is looking at improving approaches and ambition, focusing on research to help the wider community convene, align the way we survey nature, and progress from community cooperation through coordination and onto actual collaboration. And that's what we're focused on. And as part of that, there'll be wider society participation around weighted evidence. So not always looking for people to collect the most accurate data, but data that is of value in terms of its insight, and recognizing differentiation there, and how we coordinate that survey and what insight we generate. Mixed method design will be really important as part of this. Understanding how volunteers work with professionals and technology, and really seeing it about technology and people, and less itemization around who we are, but actually recognizing the support and investment needed in people. And that's my last point, is the investment in people. The key thing that I've learned over my career and over certainly the last bit is that we really do need to invest in those monitoring networks, in the communities that actually underpin our data smarts. Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks very much, Ollie. That's a really interesting insight. I'm sure we could talk about a lot more of this for a lot longer than 5 minutes, but leaving a bit of space for some discussion groups later on. Our next speaker will be Ben Ross from Nature Scott, who is the Head of Protected Areas, Innovation and Data. So Ben, you've got until 11:43, please.
Thanks, Nikki. Yeah, I'll give a quick Nature Scott perspective. I lead our work, my team, wonderful team, lead work on protected areas, on 30 by 30 nature networks, but also about our approaches to capture, management and use of data and innovative technology. Monitoring is absolutely critical to our work, and the contribution of the partnership and schemes have been invaluable to date. Very, very much worth celebrating. But as you can see from the title, I wanted to kind of frame this around celebrating, but also have a bit of a provocation about the health of nature. And Ollie sort of touched on a few of these things, actually. The image that you can see there is from our big biodiversity layer, which is a great piece of work still in progress, about mapping hotspots across Scotland to inform action on the ground. So like identification of new Nature 30 sites. So these are the first OECMs in the UK, really, the first new type of sites to deliver 30 by 30. And that's really drawn heavily on monitoring data from the partnership. But we've also used scheme data for many other areas of work. So we have our Species on the Edge program, which is a partnership including many of the partners here today. Again, really heavily reliant on scheme information. We're using it for the Scottish Biodiversity List as part of the new Scottish Biodiversity Strategy, for our site condition monitoring, goose management work, agri-environment schemes, and more. So that's just a few examples. But on this slide that's up there, I wanted to put it into a bit of context. Those schemes and the energy and effort and motivations behind them are absolutely crucial, but we've got to look at where we are right now. And nature is in crisis. It's unhealthy. It's practically on a life support machine, I would say. And the slide shows the intent of the new Scottish Biodiversity Strategy to 2030, which, put simply, the aim is to halt that decline and ultimately reverse that downward trend. And when you're in a crisis, we don't just carry on doing the same things. We critically review what we're doing, and we adapt and we transform our approaches. So for me, it's about ensuring that we drive value, and I don't mean value for money, I mean value for nature, and that that monitoring doesn't just document declines, okay, sometimes improvements, but it also needs to inform action. So if you can move on to the third slide there, Nikki, thanks. So in light of this, our approach to monitoring and the use of monitoring data, and particularly for protected and safeguarded areas, is transforming. And again, it speaks to some of the things that Ollie was talking about there before. We're calling this shift to delivering healthy ecosystems. It's a slight shift and not a complete shift in focus, to primarily ensure that we can be driving that resuscitation that's necessary. And monitoring is, of course, vital to support this, but we want to ensure that we're monitoring the right things. So the vital functions, we're pretty good at monitoring those, but we also need to focus on what the causes of ill health are, which are the pressures acting on nature, the link between those vital functions and the pressures, but most importantly, understanding what we need to do to restore health and nature. So the challenge for me is about harnessing this huge amount of energy, passion, expertise of the citizen science community and the schemes, the value of that data that's collected, and the use of innovative tech to collect it, but not to be just monitoring that heart rate and blood pressure piece, so that we're actually holding the defibrillator there, and we're thinking about how we nurse nature back into good health.
Thanks very much, Ben. That was a good analogy to think about it. And I'm sure, yeah, lots we could talk about later on in the discussion groups around different ways of looking at monitoring and its uses. But we'll move on now to Sue Byrne, who is from Natural Resources Wales, and Sue is the team leader for monitoring strategy and planning. Over to you, Sue, until 11:49, please.
Okay. Hello, bore da from Wales. Yeah, it's really important for us in Natural Resources Wales to make use of citizen science data to help us to meet our evidence needs. And perhaps I can just flag up that Natural Resources Wales, as well as a protected sites remit, does have a water quality remit. So we're very interested in catchments, and we're interested in river basin management planning. So TEPoP, really key for us in terms of our support for citizen science. I just think you can do so much more if you're working with a range of partners, and we've really seen that in terms of the talks that have come through this morning. So one of the things that I will be very pleased to be able to do after this meeting is to share the links to YouTube, and they will be looked at by our staff in a really efficient way for us to do what we need to do. In terms of us making use of citizen science data, I think we all know that unstructured data is a challenge. We don't have enormous numbers of analysts in NRW, so to be able to collaborate with others through the TSDA has been, yeah, extremely valuable. And comment from our statistician who's been involved in that work has been that it's helped her not just in thinking about unstructured data, but in thinking about bias more generally in our own monitoring. It's so so valuable to have this means and these schemes that actually do contribute citizen science data that is used for statutory reporting. I think that's a really big thing. We shouldn't forget that. And from our perspective, there's an awful lot to be learned from these long-standing schemes, you know, that are celebrating 50 years and more. There's so much to learn from these, from the perspective of water quality, where we've got a huge amount of interest and a huge range of people, perhaps different from the people who engage with biodiversity, citizen science. But I think there's a lot that we could learn, and that's valued in NRW. Next slide, please. So in terms of our aspirations, particularly valuable for us, I think, in terms of the use of TEPoP data is to support condition assessments on protected sites. So very pleased to hear some of the references to that and some of the talks this morning, and also to help us really as we move to looking at effective management reporting. So I've put a link on the presentation. So that is Wales's response to 30 by 30 and effective management reporting. I think particularly important for us, there's a lot of data out there now, just making it efficient and easy for our staff to get at it, as well as some of our partners, is incredibly useful. So automated outputs and automated maps and interpretation is really useful. And again, very happy to have heard about some of that this morning. Just to flag up, there's a link on the chat about our area statements. So that is a way to understand some of Natural Resources Wales' interests and evidence priorities. And then, based on what I said earlier, I guess that we would love to see the sort of results and information that we're getting from TEPoP members coming from water quality groups. So I'm interested in discussing what sort of things we could do around including more freshwater schemes and species and data. So I'll leave us to think on that. Thank you, Diolch.
Great. Thank you very much, Sue. That was great to hear so many complimentary words about TEPoP. And yeah, lots of pats on the back for lots of people who are involved in all of that. So the next and final of our speakers today is Lisa Maddox from the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, and Lisa works within the Protected Sites Reporting and Species Survey team. So over to you, Lisa, until 11:54, please.
Thanks, Nikki. Thank you. Yeah, it's really wonderful to be able to recognise all of the work that goes into the national monitoring schemes and the outputs that there are from this work. In Northern Ireland, our new environmental improvement plan recognises and highlights the importance of environmental data and collation of this environmental data for informing decision making and policy development and for directing positive conservation change. So it's really, really great to to hear about all the TEPoP achievements. So I have probably not done this the same way as the other CNCBs have done. I've taken a very, very quick look at most of the schemes, but I'm going to do it very, very briefly, and I've sort of broken it into the key achievements and looking towards the future from a Northern Ireland perspective. So in terms of the bird monitoring schemes, our key achievements is that we have a long-running set of data for Northern Ireland because of the TEPoP schemes. Our population statistics and annual reports provide the evidence for decision-making and for reporting requirements, such as very recently the Habitats Regulations reporting, which will be published in January. Data is used to report on the health of our bird populations and identify priorities for conservation, such as the state of the UK birds reports and in reviews of Northern Ireland priority species lists. Another key achievement, which has enabled a lot more work to be done, is that the BTO received funding for a 5-year project through the ERA's Environment Fund, which targets increasing BBS squares, and you can see from the chart there that the increase that there has been. Looking to the future, obviously, as with all the schemes, we're looking to increase the pool of volunteer citizen scientists, and in particular in terms of the BBS squares, we can see that we, despite the incredible amount of work that goes in, which still only enables us to produce trends for 39 bird species in Northern Ireland. Next slide, please, Nikki. So in terms of the butterfly monitoring scheme, then key achievements for Northern Ireland is that we fund the Butterfly Conservation Nature Positive Landscapes project through the DERA Environment Fund. We support an engagement officer who coordinates and trains volunteers. The scheme produces trends for 14 species. Butterfly conservation data has informed our priority species list review in the last few years, and data has been used directly from the scheme to inform and select a species action plan for our new species recovery partnership. And looking into the future, we'll be looking to the data from the scheme in developing a Northern Ireland biodiversity indicator for butterflies. So next slide. In terms of POMs, the fit counts are promoted by Butterfly Conservation, Bug Life and BTO. We cover on average 10.6 squares annually out of a possible 20. It provides valuable data for under-recorded groups, and it throws up new species. Last year in one of our pan traps, we got a new species for Ireland in one of our pan traps, which is always lovely to get a new species. Looking to the future, we still, despite the hard work that goes into POMs, we do still struggle to meet the threshold required for data to be used for robust analysis. So we do need dedicated staff to coordinate the volunteer effort. And from 2027 onwards, pollinator monitoring will diverge in Northern Ireland from Republic of Ireland. And with all of our schemes, we have this interesting dynamic because obviously, you know, there's a lot of all Ireland schemes as well. So we quite frequently have this sort of crossover between schemes. But with the change in legislation in Republic of Ireland, invertebrate monitoring will be done using transects rather than pan traps. But with an interesting piece of funding and on an all-Ireland perspective, we'll get the benefit of using transects and pan traps. So that's going to be quite beneficial for us for comparability across two sets of schemes. In terms of the National Plant Monitoring Scheme, Northern Ireland was included in the scheme from 2016, and it's very supported by DERA. We fund 2 posts working in partnership between BSBI and NIEA to support National Plant Monitoring Scheme, which provides additional training and support to volunteers. Last year, we initiated a programme. There was a programme initiated, for ENGO land ownership engagement, and that's really increased the number of squares that have been adopted. And again, looking to the future, it's just all about increasing the squares. We're currently sitting at about 1/3 allocated. And then in terms of the bats, so we have two key schemes which run in Northern Ireland, which is the Bentons survey and the car-based monitoring scheme, and this is where the vast majority of the bat records comes from and is held within our LURC. It's been a key data resource for all of our major reporting requirements. Again, throwing in habitats regulations reports as well there, because that's another work area of mine, but it really has been very, very key for these big reporting areas. In terms of trends, we're able to produce trends for the Bentons as a direct result of this scheme. But again, as our sort of all Ireland basis, we're also able to produce trends for 3 other species, Leislers and 2 pipistrelle species, as a result of working in partnership with Bat Conservation Ireland as well. So in terms of the future, that still does leave us quite a significant gap in our trend data for bats. So we're looking to be able to gather enough data to produce trends for all 8 of our species of bats in Northern Ireland. And we're looking to expand. We would be really hopeful to expand monitoring in terms of Myotis outside of the Bentons, brown long-eared bats, and focusing on roost surveillance and monitoring in Northern Ireland. And then very, very briefly, just to summarise the key achievements, is contribution to conservation action, as I highlighted in terms of the species action plans in the butterfly example. It produces the long-term sets of data for us. We're really fortunate with our Environment Fund mechanism that we're able to align quite well, where we can see that there's you know, a need for funding in an additional area. Our Environment Fund mechanism is really very good, actually. And a real big area of work has been contribution to the Northern Ireland priority species reviews over the last few years, in which the these TEPoP schemes have been absolutely vital. The new discoveries, which I spoke about in the POMS example, and contribution to significant reporting requirements. And then just looking to the future, our a big thing is just to increase monitoring effort, aligning with biodiversity indicators, supporting change in reporting requirements for us, and expanding the schemes, and particularly in terms of bats looking forward. So thank you very much. Sorry, I've gone over time there.
Thanks very much, Lisa. We covered a lot in the time, but thanks very much, and thanks to all of our CNCB speakers. It's been really interesting to hear how all of the work and data that comes out of all of our TEPoP schemes is being useful for policy and action in countries. And yeah, we'd really value more conversation on that in the next session in this discussion group about how we can further meet priorities for data usage. So yes, I haven't updated the time on this. We are a bit behind. We've still got about half an hour for discussion groups before we come back together for some conclusion just before 12:30. So to briefly introduce these, although the facilitators in the discussion groups will introduce you to the activities in a bit more detail. Through this session, we're aiming to identify kind of common ground for new or ongoing collaboration based on what we've been hearing about for the first part of the morning. What can we best do collaboratively, and where are the priorities for action? And breaking these down into a bit more sort of what are the shorter term actions that we could usefully take over the next few months, what are the longer term actions that we want to try and plan to work together on over the next few years, and then sort of how could TEPoP or the TSTA partnership help or support this, because that can help to steer future work planning in those areas. So I'm going to pass over to Rosie now. I hope to transfer everyone magically to their breakout groups. Hopefully this will work and technology will be on our side, and we will come back together around about 12:25 to draw together some conclusions. So have some good discussions, I hope, and please do click on the concept board link while it's open. Great. Thanks very much, everyone. As is always the case with these discussions, I think we could probably talk for lots longer about different thoughts here. And as Kirsty was just saying to her group, please do continue to add any ideas or thoughts to the concept board. As I say, we'll leave it open. I think to conclude, instead of having sort of feedback from all the groups, although obviously you are welcome to go and have a look at what everybody else has been putting, and we've got a box at the top of the board where we're going to be drawing together all of the sort of short-term and long-term priorities. To conclude, Chris Cheppings is going to say a few words to sort of summarise. She's been flitting between all the breakout groups and is going to pull out some sort of key themes from the conversations today. So Chris, can I pass over to you, please?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. And I was indeed flitting, and I probably hit all of your groups at just the wrong moment. So I apologise if I don't summarise what you were saying. But I think, what I was really hearing throughout today is, nature doesn't stay still. And so our schemes can't stay still either. Society changes, technology changes, but above all, nature changes. So what is going to change, and are we going to be able to see those changes using our schemes? Something we have to keep reflecting on. And I think that also came into what Ollie said from Natural England of why are we monitoring, and that needs to feed through into the how are we monitoring. So I think we heard a lot about different things that are in aspirations, greater use of local data and nesting that within the national data, and really using that to inform action, not just reporting what's happening, but can we inform action on the ground? We heard a lot about add-ons to maximize visit value, or if we're talking about ringing, maximizing, having that bird in the hand. So how can we all think about add-ons that will be relevant to the volunteers, but can really maximise that value. We heard a lot about providing new individualised feedback, personalised feedback, moving validation to the volunteers by shifting things online, allowing the volunteers to run their own data reports. Really, really positive things, and I think can really help all of us if we can share some of that learning. Then I dropped into various conversations about the kind of more ecosystem focus that we heard from all of the statutory bodies, and how do we bridge that seemingly a disconnect between ecosystems and species schemes. But there isn't really a disconnect there, because everything is based on species. So how do we standardize the information we collect on habitat management and change and intervention so that we get this holistic picture? And there were many other things I heard about. Let's share ideas on training, and also a lot of discussion about access to land holdings and landowner permissions. But I think I've run out of time now, so I can't even feedback more on what I heard, but it was a really rich discussion. So thank you everybody so much for that.
Thanks very much, Chris. That was a great sort of high-level summary of a lot of information that has been run through today. And just to reiterate that, thanks to everyone for their input into the breakout groups as well. I think we had some really sort of practical actions and priorities which we pulled out from the discussion, and I'll look forward to going and having a look at all the other ideas on the concept board from other groups. We're planning on writing up the concept board and the event more generally, and we will share that around with the TEPoP bulletin mailing list, probably alongside the January bulletin. We will be compiling all these collaboration ideas from across breakout groups and sort of developing an action plan to take forward the priorities in the short and long term, both within the sort of TEPoP work planning as well as the TSDA work planning into the short and long term. And we will be obviously sharing this event recording online with on our YouTube channel, so please do share it around with anyone that you think might be interested in all of these scheme updates. And please do continue to have any useful conversations that were started here today. We will leave the concept board open probably until the end of the week, because I appreciate this has been a vast amount of information that you've all taken in. So if any sort of ideas form over the next few days, please do continue to add them in there. And even once the board is finished, please remember that we're always happy to receive emails of ideas of kind of cross-collaborative projects. I've popped an event feedback form on the screen here if you're happy to give us any feedback on the event, so we can use that to steer our planning for future events. And the TEPoP e-bulletin link is there just in case you want to register for that. So somehow only 2 minutes over schedule. Thank you so much again. And here are to all of our speakers and to everyone who's participated today. We look forward to continuing all these collaborations into the future. And please give yourselves all a big pat on the back, because we can't do it in person, to say well done for all your hard work on all of the schemes and well-deserved celebrations. Thanks very much, everyone.